Rocky Marciano. You know, you kind of remind me of The Rock. You know that?
Marciano.
Hello, that's it. Rocky
Marciano.
You knew him?
Ooh, he hit hard. He hit you so hard at Johnny Kim folks in Africa.
The toughest fight would be the man who's the hardest to knock out, whether he's got a style. And a fellow who had no style, just a bull, was Rocky Marciano. He would be the most trouble, I think.
Most boxing fans would have heard of the legendary story and achievements of Rocky Marciano. The man managed to retire undefeated as the heavyweight champion of the world, something very few people will ever do. But it's not just that. In his 49 heavyweight fights, he walked away with 49 wins and 43 knockouts. The man literally had a perfect career. He beat other legends and continues to inspire generations. But while most stories of legendary fighters end in the ring, Rocky's took a particularly strange turn. Today I'm going to tell the story of one of the toughest men on earth and the eerie events leading up to his tragic death, the mystery of which is still discussed today. I'm Bayliun, and this is a tragic ending to the greatest heavyweight career of all time.
Heavyweight champion of the world, Rocky Marciano.
Our story begins tucked away in the heart of New England, America. In Massachusetts, a place known for producing particularly tough individuals, many of whom would make boxing history. Rocco Francis Marciano was born in Brockton in 1923. He had a typical upbringing at the time, the son of Italian immigrants who'd made the trip over to the US. He was traditionally raised, but before life had barely begun, it almost ended. At just 18 months old, he developed severe pneumonia. As a child, he almost didn't make it, a legendary boxing career that almost didn't happen. And in fact, he didn't just jump right into boxing. He was actually more of an athlete and a weightlifter before he laced up any gloves. A student of the famous Charles Atlas, a man remembered as one of the best bodybuilders in American history. They created an entire marketing campaign out of him, and it kind of swept the nation. And it turned a young Rocky into a very physically fit young man. But again, before any kind of boxing career could begin, a little thing called World War II happened. Like most American men, Rocky joined the army, but that was actually where his boxing career would begin. He started competing as an amateur and actually, well, he'd suffered a few losses. He failed to win the Golden Gloves tournament. He didn't get through the Olympic tryouts, but by the time he got enough experience and then turned pro, well, all the physical training had started to pay off. He was running 10 miles a day, hill sprints, swimming. His work ethic was second to none, and he emerged a monster.
To this one video that I sent you about Rocky Marciano and how insane his training was. It was 7 days a week. He would spar sometimes 30, 40 rounds in a day. He would run 10 miles in the morning and then 5 more miles at night. And then he would swim 2 miles in the lake. And he never took days off.
Another thing, he was like focused on recovery and sleep.
Yep.
Like he would be in bed like at 9, I think I said, every night.
His first 16 bouts would all end by KO, 9 of them in the first round.
Matthews is down. 2 lightning fast left hooks. He's badly hurt.
He just flew up the rankings, beating much more experienced boxers, but it was his fight against the 16-1 Carmine Vingo that first made headlines. From the get-go, it was a brutal contest, but Rocky showed off every bit of his conditioning and physical strength as a heavyweight. That, combined with his superior movement and footwork, he danced around Vingo and was crashing in with hard shots. Rocky was not a guy afraid to go toe-to-toe, and every time they did, he came out on top, sending Vingo to the canvas.
The thing about Marciano was, he was not the most talented, but he did not get fucking tired, and he hit like a truck.
Sadly, after this fight, Vingo was carried away to the hospital on a stretcher and given just a 50-50 chance of survival. Luckily, he made a full recovery and would live till he was 85, with him and Rocky becoming friends later in life. But it certainly was a reality check to the world of pro boxing. Rocky was a very respectful, very calculated guy. He didn't always fight in this wild style. He was controlled, rational, saw his openings and went for them. As a man and a boxer, he was incredibly disciplined, which makes what happened after his career was over all the more peculiar. Rocky continued to grow as a boxer and into the spotlight, and in 1951 he took on the legendary heavyweight Joe Louis. This was another non-stop action fight, but Rocky used his superior conditioning as a weapon. He was constantly pushing Joe back, making him miss, and then keeping up the pressure. This was Joe Louis, incredibly experienced, and he stayed in the fight. But it was on the outside, Rocky was just slicker, faster, impossible to hit, and he'd step in and drop thunder.
have is keeping Rocky off target a great deal in these last 2 rounds. And yet Lewis claimed later he had injured his left hand in the 3rd round.
Then, as Lewis started to slow down, the insane cardio Rocky had as a heavyweight was on display once again.
One he's been using to good advantage throughout the fight. Marciano exerting more and more pressure as he moves in for the kill.
In the final rounds, Rocky was moving just as fast, still had power in his punches, and he sent the legend to the canvas. A brutal, hellacious combo sparking Joe Louis through the ropes.
You can see that Lewis is in trouble. He's hurt. Marciano pitching with everything he's got. Backs his man to the ropes to finish him off. Now watch. A left. Another left crumples Lewis. A blazing right. And Lewis sails through the ropes.
It was a symbolic passing of the torch at the time in the heavyweight boxing era, and Rocky would go on to pick up the world title against Jersey Joe Walcott the following year.
When I fought Jersey Joe Walcott in Philadelphia, he was the toughest man I ever fought. He was a real champion that night. He used the element of surprise on me and had me down in the 1st round.
And it was much the same kind of performance. He constantly pressured the champion until the final rounds where he had nothing left and Rocky landed another jaw-dropping KO.
But in the 12th round, I thought I hurt him, and in the 13th, I was able to knock him out.
It was an emphatic way to take the title, and Rocky would go on to defend the belt 16 times in a truly staggering career where as a heavyweight he was never defeated. Eventually he decided to hang up the gloves just a few years later, but the 49-0 record, the only ever heavyweight champion to retire undefeated, would live on. Perhaps Usyk will soon join that exclusive club.
In those 8 years of professional fighting, how many fights did you engage in?
I had 49 fights.
As a fighter, Rocky was always composed and always calm. Nothing too fancy, just great boxing skill, conditioning and heart. But after he retired, that's where the real mystery begins. And as some said, he pretty much walked away in the peak of his career.
Training and fighting, this is probably the first Christmas that you and your missus actually have had a chance to go out like a normal couple and do their Christmas shopping. Would that be right?
That's right, Ed. It's a happy one too, and the first time we've been able to do it in New York.
It had truly been an incredible run. Not only was he named in his short career Fighter of the Year by Ring Magazine 3 times, but all 3 of his championship fights in those years were also Fight of the Year. And even that Walcott KO was recognized as truly just one of the greatest heavyweight KOs of all time, even up until the early 2000s. Compared to someone like Muhammad Ali or Joe Frazier, Rocky kind of shied away from the spotlight after retiring. He became more reclusive and fostered a very private lifestyle, enjoying his time in nature, getting used again to small town life, apparently taking up outdoor activities like hunting and hiking. But as he became more reclusive in his activities, so did he as a person. Not much was heard from him. He did occasionally commentate, but wasn't really one to make frequent appearances. Which is why what happened to him next was all the more interesting. On the evening of the 31st of August 1969, just the night before Rocky Marciano's 46th birthday, he was planning to make a quick trip from his home in Florida to Iowa, simply to give a speech as a favor for a friend to support his son at a birthday party. He was supposed to return home that evening. At first, there didn't seem to be anything too wrong with the trip. The pilot, Glenn Bells, was fairly experienced with over 200 hours of flight time and had been hired by a man called Frankie Farrell, the son whose birthday it was. But this was not going to be an ordinary trip. A storm was brewing over the region, one that would definitely impact the flight path, and more than that, it turns out Bells wasn't the usual pilot Farrell hired for these kind of trips. He was just filling in on short notice, and he had just a handful of hours clocked flying at night, and certainly wasn't prepared for the kind of conditions the storm was about to bring. But apparently, Rocky, being the nice guy he was, trusted him. Trusted that he'd been sent by Farrell, and as it was a favor, he apparently didn't want to refuse, but it would be a fatal mistake. The storm brought with it low ceilings and visibility, but they didn't turn back. Bells flew on. Reports on the incident that followed suggested he asked for a radar fix, not quite knowing where he was altitude-wise as he entered Des Moines. The plane flew too low, hit a tree 2 miles short of the runway he was aiming for, and it ended up crashing, and everyone on board was killed on impact. A truly tragic end to a legendary career, perhaps one of the most legendary of all time. The mysteries around Rocky's death continued, however, as Frankie Farrell had also been on board the plane himself. He was not just any son, he was the son of former mob boss Lou Frato, or Lou Farrell. He himself had been a former boxer, and it just led to more questions. Why was Rocky going to his son's birthday party, and on the eve of his own birthday, and with a storm brewing? Was he encouraged to come perhaps more than he wanted to, especially given the weather conditions? Or was he truly just doing him a favor and didn't want to refuse? There's all kinds of conspiracies around his death, including ones involving UFOs and Rocky's interest in them somehow being connected to the late night flight. But the truth is, sadly, after a career in front of them, Rocky Marciano's story ended far from the roaring crowds of Madison Square Garden or flashing cameras of title fights. It ended with a plane crash that still feels senseless even 50 years later. He had lived his life in pursuit of discipline, and in the ring he had been flawless. Every fight ended the way he wanted to, but his death, that was completely out of his hands. In the end, Rocky Marciano remains one of the most perfect fighters who ever lived. Not because he won every fight, but because he left nothing undone, no stone unturned in his preparation, and it's what made him one of the greatest heavyweight champions of all time.